border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Throws deep downfield for the end zone, a lunging catch, and it's a score for the Herd, Jerron Woodyard. And it is 37-0, and Grant Wells is moving up toward a 300-yard passing performance in the first half. That is his 4th touchdown toss.
Story toward Jackson, got separation to the 20, to the 10, and he will go. Lucky Jackson from 54 yards out.
Pressure off the edge. Screen delivers. What a catch, Levias, who brings it in. Armani Levias to the house. Touchdown, Marshall.
This will be from 52 yards. From the far hash mark. John Haggerty, the punter, will hold. Jared Nash will snap it. It's definitely long enough. It is good! Unbelievable. The true freshman, Corey Munson, hammers it home from 52 yards.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We've got huge news that we get to talk about this week. Marshall's coaching search took not a lot of time. We talked about it on the last podcast how it was the end of the Doc Holliday era, and we started floating around names that we might see mentioned for the job, and most of the names that we mentioned were at least tossed around by other fans and other people on social media, but none of those folks really made it outside of Brad Lambert to the final 3. Yeah. And then Lambert made it, from what I gather, down to the final 2, and then Marshall hired its coach, and it was not current Marshall defensive coordinator Brad Lambert. It turned out to be the guy that I thought would be I don't even want to say a contender, because when you think of terms of teams like Alabama, you don't think about Marshall as being a contender necessarily for a coach, for a place to steal one of their coaches or hire away one of their coaches. And that's exactly what happened. Marshall was hired as its, I believe, 31st head coach in school history. Alabama associate head coach, a running backs coach, also known as the number 1 recruiter in America by 24/7 Sports, Charles Huff. And Trace, the fan base has been the majority of the fan base has united in excitement and happiness. Yep. And it feels like there was a huge exhale from a lot of the fan base, and they kind of thought, wow, we kind of got this one right, I think. And of course, it takes a couple of years to figure out if you ultimately get the hire right or not. But from an initial reaction, the fans are like, yes, this is who we wanted. Look, I know I ran a poll on the Moonshine Throwdown account. I forgot to tweet out the results of that, but I had over 500 respondents, 500 voters on that poll. And it was the final 3 that they had, which was Brad Lambert, the offensive line and offensive coordinator from Louisville, and Dwayne Ledford, and of course, Charles Huff. And resoundingly, I'm talking like 70% of respondents voted for Charles Huff. So that's who the fans wanted. Whoever the powers that be that made those decisions listened for the most part to what the fans wanted, as well as I'm sure they did their own due diligence. Of course, why wouldn't you? And I think they hired the best candidate. I mean, I just do. So we can talk about some of Charles Huff's pedigree here in a little bit, but I want to get your initial reaction on Marshall hiring Charles Huff as its next head coach.
I'm absolutely pumped about it, honestly. I mean, I tweeted, outside of Byron Leftwich, this is the best realistic hire they could have made. Like, in my opinion, this is the best they could have done. I mean, you have a guy that's highly regarded. And, I mean, I could see him in the next – I mean, hopefully he stays at Marshall a long time if he works out. But I could see him in 5 or 10 years being, like, a major SEC, like, head coach. Like, I could see that from this guy. I think he's that good. Yeah, like you said, I mean, number 1 recruiter ranked in the country. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows he's not, they're not going to be pulling in 5 stars to Marshall, but don't think he's not going to get top line talent, because he will get several top players. You can bet on that. I mean, yeah, Alabama, I mean, it kind of recruits itself, but he's going to get some big time talent in Huntington. You can bank on that, especially considering he's already offered about 4 4-star recruits in the first 24 hours of being officially the head coach. So he's off to the races. So, but I mean, I think it's just a really pretty knockout hire, if you ask me. I mean, just watching some of the stuff that he's done in the past, well-traveled guy. He's been in a lot of big places. I mean, when Nick Saban has glowing responses or, remarks about you, you've done your job. That letter that Nick Saban put out talking about how much good he did for the program and everything, that really resonates because that's Nick Saban. That's the greatest to ever do it in the college game. So that really, resonates. And not to mention the fact that when he was I remember watching a video the other day when he was at Mississippi State, they had one of their practices. They showed him wired, like to do with coaches, and he just oozes charisma and energy. I mean, it's just so palpable. Like you can just see it. He's just a very energetic, just charismatic guy, and I think that's exactly what this program needs right now. They need somebody to shake things up, and he's going to shake. They need somebody to just turn the program upside down in a good way because it was very stale. I mean, there's no denying that it was very stale. And I think this Charles Huff's a perfect guy to try to reshape the program. And I mean, he's not going to back down. I mean, yeah, he might be going up against the Clemsons and the Ohio States and the Alabamas of the world in recruiting. He's not going to back down. I'm sure he's going to hire a great staff. I mean, he's young, 37 years old. He's just such a, young, bright mind. I mean, I think this is just a great hire. And just based on the tweets he's already put out, he seems really excited to be at Marshall. The letter the part that he put out in that article talking about hiring him, he seemed very glowingly about Marshall and everything. So I think it's going to be really good. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Marshall's got enough talent in place right now to probably still compete in the Conference USA championship picture next year, but it just depends on who else they can add. I mean, of course, the transfer portal is always a question, especially now with the new coach and everything. And so, I mean, I think this is just a phenomenal hire. I'm really looking forward to hearing that introductory press conference, the Zoom conference or whatever they're going to do. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, I think I tweeted this also. It seems like it's one of the most universally accepted and excitable hires Marshall's ever made. I mean, I feel like pretty much the entire fan base is just so ecstatic over this hire, and they should be. I mean, they needed to break out of the trend that they had been set in for the last 2 or 3 decades of hiring Marshall guys only, hiring West Virginians, hiring your buddies. They needed to break out of that trend. They needed to take it in a different direction, and they did that. So kudos to the search committee or President Gilbert or Mike Hamrick or whoever was up, for the task. But they needed to break out of that. I mean, it's almost, people call it the good old boy, whatever. I mean, they needed to break out of that. They needed to, if they were really serious about this program, they needed to hire somebody like Charles Huff, and they did. And they're serious about it, and I think that they're really trying to make a ploy to really, improve their standing and try to get as big as they can possibly get. So that's a great hire. No disrespect to Brad Lambert, but it just wouldn't have been this excitable. It wouldn't have been this universally recognized as a great hire or potentially a great hire. It just would not have been. So awesome hire. I think it's going to work out really great for the Herd.
Yeah, this is made a splash. I mean, across national media. Anytime you can take an Alabama coach and bring him to your school, that's going to make headlines across all the national media outlets, and everybody's it's going to take a part of everybody's timeline for a little bit. And let's face it, that's how people consume their news now. So if you can control what people are scrolling past, and they continually are seeing the, Charles Huff hired by Marshall over and over again, well, I mean, that's the equivalent of pretty much big news. That's the front page story now. So we talked a number of times over the past couple of years doing this podcast, whenever we would talk about coaching searches, and we always seem to uniformly think Marshall needs to go in a younger direction. They need a youthful coach, somebody that's more vibrant, somebody that gets today's kids a little bit better, and doesn't have to necessarily rely on the assistant coaches to make those relationships. And now Marshall's got that. They've got a young guy, 37 years old, like you said. He can build those relationships directly, with the recruits. He can go right into the living room and be able to build the relationship instead of having to have an assistant coach maybe be that conduit, the initial guy that's building the relationship, and then the head coach relationship comes a little bit later. this is a big deal for Marshall, I believe. I just feel like it's a big deal. And you never know what the future holds. He could be a conference champion in year one, or Marshall could go to 0 in year one. You don't know. But either way it does go, you have to be patient with the process. Probably the most dangerous thing that could happen is if Marshall comes out and runs the table through the conference and wins a title in year one, and then the expectations are going to go even further through the roof to repeat in year two. But look, for years and years and years, folks were okay with 7-8 wins and a bowl game, and that was good enough. So if you can return that in year one, well, those naysayers ought to just pipe down a little bit, because if anything else, you've maintained the current level of success, right? And if anything you're able to do above that is just icing on the cake. So I just think it's a really, really good hire. I think the fan base is really excited about it, and rightfully so. They should be. So, well, thanks, buddy. I love you too. What? Dang, man, dad first and a podcaster second.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about his pedigree for a second. Some of the stops he's been, places he's been, players he's coached, that kind of thing. So this is not just kind of the run-of-the-mill assistant coach, Trace. He's put many guys into the NFL, and not just into the NFL, but stars in the NFL. Who's who among players in college football in recent years. I mean, just absolute all-timers, really, when you want to think about it. So I'm not going to go all the way back to his first job, which was in 2006. So he broke into coaching in 2006. But let's just go back to roughly the time that Doc Holliday was hired at Marshall. Okay, that was 2010. In 2010, Coach Huff started out as the offensive line coach and running game coordinator at Hampton, which was where he played. He's an alumnus of Hampton. He was a several position player there, fullback, tight end, guard, and center. I mean, kind of played all over the place. Then the very next year ended up at Vanderbilt as the offensive quality control coach. And the very next year was in the NFL as assistant running back coach of the Buffalo Bills. Then a 1-year stint with Western Michigan and PJ Fleck as the running backs coach. And then for the next 3 seasons, he was at Penn State as the running backs coach and special teams coach, where he coached Saquon Barkley, was instrumental in recruiting several other 4- and 5-star backs and other players to the Nittany Lion program. Then left when Joe Moorhead got the head coaching job at Mississippi State from Penn State. Went with him to Mississippi State, where he became the assistant head coach, running game coordinator, and running backs coach for Mississippi State. And then, of course, the last 2 seasons, he's been with Nick Saban in Alabama as associate head coach and running backs coach there. And we know what he's done with, guys like Najee Harris. I mean, the stats speak for themselves, the development and what Harris has been able to do. But that brings us to today. And today, officially hired, approved, contract approval, all that good stuff as Marshall University's 31st head coach. And I just don't know what else to say. I think this is really cool. This means a lot not just for Marshall. We talked about how important this hire could be moving forward, because let's face it, things are in the landscape of college football. We'll see if it returns mostly back to normal. But Trace, we could be staring down the barrel of realignments coming up within the next, 5-6 years, whenever, you're talking about the contract for the college football playoff needing to be renewed or things like that. So there are just always things that could lead to a shakeup, and hiring a guy that could put you in that next upper echelon of schools to where you're a first choice, so to speak, out of the Conference USA to fill a slot in a newly formed G5 conference or whatever. It's pretty big. So let's talk about some things that have changed on the Herd roster since we last podcast. We've heard of a couple guys that have now departed. Derek Pitts entered the transfer portal, kind of surprisingly, and he's now at NC State, where he's a grad transfer, so he'll finish out his eligibility at NC State. And Darius Hodge announced that he was going to be foregoing the remainder of his eligibility and declaring for the NFL draft. So 2 more pieces off of that Herd defense that has already lost Tavante Beckett gone. So I don't know how to feel about that, Trace. It's going to definitely, you think you're definitely going to see a little bit of a decline with all these huge impact players leaving. But of course, again, you start talking about that transfer portal. What do you think? What do you think Marshall's going to do now to try to, pick up some of the slack that's fallen off of that defense and that offense? I mean, we remember Josh Ball's now gone, Why am I drawing a blank on Brendan Knox's name, for crying out loud? Brendan Knox is now also gone. We did hear one player in particular come out and say that he would not be going anywhere. He's returning. And that's offensive lineman Will Ulmer. Huge addition to get back. I mean, he never really left. So that's a big voice in the locker room that you want to have in your locker room. Glad Will's decided to stick it out and stay at Marshall. So, based on what we know now from our last podcast, what's the approach? What do you think the approach is going to be for Coach Huff and filling some of these holes?
Well, I mean, there's no secret that everybody's probably going to be really hitting the transfer portal hard these days. I mean, it's absolutely taken off to a point that I don't know if anybody expected to see how much the transfer portal has taken off. I mean, people left and right just enter this thing at all times. I mean, before it was just like, kind of sparingly used kind of, thing, but now it's just like every other day you can see somebody enter the transfer portal. So, like, it's really crazy to see. There's a lot of talent in there, of course. I think Huff will definitely be able to hit that pretty hard. I mean, heck, like you said, a couple of those second or third string Alabama guys could really come in handy for Marshall if they wanted to try to go that route. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but either way, I mean, I think they'll definitely be able to get some guys out of there if they really push that effort. And then as far as just normal recruiting goes, I think, if he recruits some high enough level talent, which he will, and if he can get them to come to Huntington, heck, they could be immediate playmakers as freshmen. So, like, that could be, immediate big-time contributors. So, I mean, I don't think they're going to be short on talent. Marshall hasn't been short on talent in football in a long time, so I don't think that's certainly going to be a problem. And then, not to mention, there's a lot of younger guys on the Marshall roster that will probably start developing more and start contributing more. So, I mean, I don't think there are going to be a whole lot of issues. I mean, yeah, defense has lost some key guys clearly, but I mean, that's every single year. You always are going to lose great players. I mean, that's just the nature of college football. So, I mean, I think they'll be fine ultimately, especially depending on how they hit the transfer portal and how they recruit in the next few months. So, I think that there won't be many issues there. Offensively, I mean, they still got a lot of guys back. I'll tell you, two players that are probably going to contribute more or benefit more from Charles Huff than anybody is Sheldon Evans and Knowledge McDaniel. I can tell you that right now. Those guys, I expect they're going to make a huge jump in the next season. I mean, especially now that Brendan Knox is gone, one of those two guys are going to be the first-string running back, probably Sheldon Evans. He's probably the best leader on the team right now. And then Knowledge McDaniel, I think everybody's very excited to see him. He runs different, man. He just really does. I expect that to be a great 1-2 punch for years to come, at least a couple years to come. So I really like the outlook of that potentially.
Yeah, while you were talking, I brought up the 24/7 transfer portal tracker, you know what I mean? And just for gigs, went to the Alabama site to see who was in there, and kind of sadly, they've only got 4 guys in the portal. 2 of them have already moved on. They've got a safety that's in the transfer portal, and their kicker is in the portal, and he is immediately eligible. I don't know if that's something that an angle that Coach Huff might try to pull, but if you got a kicker from Alabama, it's immediately eligible. Maybe not. I mean, I like Shane Chucci. I like what he was able to do, but we're definitely going to have to see some a little bit more distance come out of that leg. We need to be able to hit those longer kicks and see the accuracy tighten up a little bit. But overall, I think he did a really good job. Didn't really, cost Marshall any games. So but still, competition breeds success, right? So we'll see how that goes. As far as a potential staff goes, I think we know right now that is the single biggest factor of whether you will be successful or you will be unsuccessful, especially when you're talking about a first-time head coach. And we mentioned some guys that we hope that a new coach might strongly consider retaining.
Yes.
And, I still feel like Dallas Baker did a great job. The wide receivers coach, I think he deserves a real opportunity to stick. And I think he did a really good job with the guys this year. The game across the entire unit definitely elevated. Kyle Segler is another one, tight ends coach. I think he is a great one. We've seen the heavy emphasis on tight ends in Marshall's offense in the past couple of years. I think he's one that has earned the right to continue coaching at Marshall if he, is afforded that option. On the defensive side of the ball, of course, how can you go any farther than J.C. Price, Cornell Brown? They're great. I mean, they're great. Marshall's defensive line and defense as a whole has just been phenomenal for as long as I can remember, really. Greg Atkins has done a fabulous job with the offensive line. I mean, I don't know, Trace, where do you see, those, a lot of times head coaches fill their staff with, that's where their real recruiters are hidden, are on, like Huff is the running backs coach. He's a guy that can not only do the job with the RBs, but he can also go into living rooms and start snagging you some big time talent. So signing day is coming up quick. Let's put it that way. What do you got? 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks until the official second national signing day.
Yeah.
I expect we'll see a quick, swift move on staff hirings and staff decisions, but I would imagine first order of business is to get into the locker room, have a team meeting, and start talking to the guys that are on the roster and get a feel for who's going to be there and who's not going to be there. So, gut feeling, Trace, do you think we'll see a sizable exodus of players, or do you think it will be minimal?
I don't know. I'd probably say minimal. I feel like most of the players are going to probably stick it out. I mean, once you get into the Marshall program and everything, you figure out what it's all about. That's kind of something I feel like it's a little hard just to up and leave, even when there's a coaching change. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be some players leave when a new head coach comes to town. That's anybody, any team in college football. That's what's always going to happen. So, like, you can't expect nobody to leave. It's just, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot. And even if there is, quote unquote, a lot, I feel like there'll be enough guys come in to kind of offset everything. Like, I feel like it's not going to be that big of a difference one way or the other. And as far as the coaches situation, I mean, there's a lot of really good coaches that he could keep on staff. I mean, yeah, of course, usually when you get a new head coach, he pretty much cleans house, brings in his own staff, maybe outside of a couple guys. But I think there's a lot of guys, like you said, like you mentioned on this staff, that I would like to see come back. J.C. Price, Brad Lambert, for that matter. I'd love to see Brad Lambert. Love to see him come back. I mean, he's had 2 great years as defensive coordinator for Marshall. I'd love to see him come back. There's a lot of guys out there that I'd like to see on the staff. And I feel like Huff's going to really look into that. I mean, he's going to, probably pay a lot of attention to that, because you can't – I mean, it's – a lot of those coaches have been there a long time. So, like, they have a lot, invested in Marshall and everything. But even if he does – primarily clean house outside of a couple guys, maybe he's going to have some quality coaches coming in there, because he's been a lot of places. He's worked with a lot of great coaches, and he's going to have connections. And I don't worry about that in the slightest. I think he's going to have a great staff, because, I mean, just hearing him talk and watching him out there, I mean, I don't see how you wouldn't want to, coach with that guy, because he's extremely, personable. It seems like very well spoken, eloquent speaker, energetic as all get out. Like I said, I mean, I feel like he's going to have endless connections. So whether it's keeping a lot of the Marshall coaches or bringing in a lot of your own, I don't worry about the staff at all.
Yeah. One note I will say is that I find it highly, highly, highly unlikely that Brad Lambert will return to the sideline, just because he was a finalist for the job. And that's, after interviewing and becoming one of the final 2 and not getting the job, you just don't stick around. I mean, right. Because that's the type of thing that says, okay, well, a lot of players were very vocal about wanting Brad Lambert as coach, right? So that retaining that guy, while he's a phenomenal defensive coordinator, is going to set yourself up to have dissension within the ranks and putting division amongst, the guys that wanted Lambert versus the guys that didn't. And you just can't have that. You got to be unified in your approach. You got to be unified in your attack plan. You've got to have a unified front. So you don't have time for dissension within your own locker room. So I wouldn't look for that to happen, but some of the other guys, I hope they return. I hope they get an opportunity to return. It makes for an exciting time. This is really cool. I think the rivalry is going to be in good hands for many years to come between Coach Helton and Coach Huff. It may take Huff a couple of years to get, the type of team that he wants on the field. The Toppers are absolutely killing the transfer portal this year. They are killing it. So they are trying to win now and win big. They're trying to put an offense on the field that looks like what fans will remember from the Jeff Brom era, which, of course, Tyson Helton was the offensive coordinator then. I mean, you can tell that they're putting an emphasis on points and passing and speed. So this ought to be really, really interesting. The bar is going to be set pretty high. Of course, we never know if the chemistry is going to match the stars and the hype that you get coming in, but if it works out that way, I think we are in for some very, very, very exciting games between the Herd and Hilltoppers for years to come. But right now, it's the Charles Huff era, and I'm excited to see where we go from here. Trace, what do you think are the biggest, if you had to nail it down 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, biggest strengths that Charles Huff brings to the job for Marshall? What are those strengths?
Well, we've already, we talked about a lot of them, and a lot of people have, but I think one thing right off the top of my head is recruiting. Even though it's not Alabama, he's still going to be able to recruit the heck out of the players to get from Marshall. There's no doubt about it. And whatever staff he brings with him is definitely going to be able to recruit as well. So that's one big thing. Another thing is just his youth and his vibrancy. Or I don't know if vibrancy is a word, but he's a very vibrant coach. Like you said, energetic, charismatic, young, youthful. That's a big plus because, a lot of people had said, and you could kind of see, obviously you could see what people meant by saying that Doc's kind of stuck in the past a lot with some of his methods and some of the way he coaches and everything. And I just think Charles Huff's a much more, up-to-date coach as far as hopefully offense, which I don't think there'll be a problem there. I think he's been with Nick Saban, he's been with James Franklin and all those guys. He's going to know how to to put points on the board and run an offense. So I think it'll be better in that aspect. I think it'll be better with just flat out energy. He's a different type of personality than Doc, clearly. So I think he's going to, like you said, I think he'll be able to relate with modern day players more probably than Doc. So there's a lot that stuff right there will pay big dividends. And I think his press conferences and his post game it's going to be a lot different. I think that's going to be a big plus because a lot of people just got fed up with Doc's just nonstop coach speak because that's all he ever did. Like he said the same 10 phrases for 10 years. I think you're going to see a lot more. I'm not going to say Dan D'Antoni wit or anything, but you're going to see a lot more just personable, more honest, kind of stuff. And I think that's going to really appease a lot of the fan bases to hear stuff like that. So there's a lot of positive. Put it this way, there's an infinite amount of more pluses than minuses. Let's just say that. But a couple potential cons or minuses or whatever would be the fact he hasn't been a head coach before. But I don't really think that matters that much. Marshall's had a lot of success with guys that hadn't been a head coach before. Bob Pruitt, he did okay. Doc did okay. The basketball team hired a guy by the name of Billy Donovan. He did okay. So, it's that doesn't really matter. This is and I'd rather get a guy that's young, 37 years old, that hasn't been a head coach than get a guy like Rich Rodriguez that's flamed out as head coaches years ago. And now he's just trying to get back on his feet. I'd rather have a guy like Charles Huff. That's what I'm, because you're getting him at the start of his career as a head coach rather than the end where he's already flamed out. So I'd rather have that. And then, of course, people will look at the fact that he's been in a lot of places and he might not stay at Marshall a long time. But that's, what? Look at all the major Group of 5 teams in the country now. They have a head coach that gets them, a bunch of good years, a couple, 2 or 3 great years, maybe getting a New Year's Six bowl, and then they're gone. That's just the nature of the business now. You're not going to get a guy like Bob Pruitt that wins 10 or 11 games every year. He's not going to stay for 9 years. It's not going to happen. Or Doc, Doc won a lot of games, but you're not going to get a guy that wins a lot of games and stays 11 years. It's just not going to happen anymore. And, look at some of the other Group of 5 teams in the country. What was the UCF's coach last name? Frost, right?
Scott Frost, yeah.
Scott Frost had an unbelievable success at UCF. He went to Nebraska. And then PJ Fleck had unbelievable success at Western Michigan. He's now in Minnesota. And it's just that's just how it works right now. I mean, that's not really a con to me. That's what you have to do if you want to have big time success. And even if he does have great success and leaves in 3 years or whatever, they're going to probably have a pretty daggone big buyout in his contract to where they can hire another guy just as good, or have enough money to hire a great guy. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about that. So like that's really the only cons I can think of, or maybe like you might question who he's going to hire on his staff, but I mean, I don't worry about that. I mean, so I think put it this way, there's entirely more pluses than minuses. And that I don't see how you can't disagree. I don't think you can disagree with that.
Yeah. I agree with you. Some of the negatives to me, I think, it will come on game day. And when you're talking about game time, game day, in-game decision-making, where you've just never had to do that before. All of a sudden you're the guy that has to make those decisions. And we've seen coaches struggle with that in the past on both sides of this rivalry. I mean, even Doc made some decisions or failed to make some decisions at times in crucial situations, and everybody's like, what the hell's going on here? So, those are negatives that come with any coaching situation. We've seen it along the sidelines in Huntington for a decade, and we've seen it in Bowling Green happen through several head coaches. So those things just happen. But, when we start getting into the inexplicable decisions, like, and I'm not trying to pile on here, but, we used to see when Mike Sanford was coaching at Western, he would go for it on 4th down from his own 15. That's the kind of stuff that you just can't have it. It's like 4th and 8 from your own 15, and you're gonna make a run for it. And those are the kind of things that you hope you don't see. But the positives for me, I'm with you. They far outweigh the potential negative. The biggest potential negative is that you lay an egg in the win-loss column for 2 or 3 years, and then you have to reset and hire another coach. But that happens everywhere. Now, surely you don't want it to happen in Huntington. We don't want to see it happen in Huntington either. But I'm saying that's the biggest problem. The best problem is that the guy kills it for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and he has a big buyout, and some big school wants him, and they're going to pay you to get him. That's the way the business works. I don't understand why people are afraid of that. That's how it works. It's wash, rinse, repeat. You find a guy, he does well, put a big buyout in it, he's hired away, you use the money to find the next coach. That's just how it works for G5s. They're getting $40, $50, $60 million a year in revenue from media and sponsorships and everything else, and Marshall's getting $200K. Yeah. How are you going to compete? You have to. That's a revenue stream. By hiring the right coach, it becomes a revenue stream. Okay, that's how you're continually being able to find the right coaches. You have to turn that into, your ability to maximize your coaching hire, to put you in the market to hire those up and comers that are going to demand a high dollar. Because we talked about it before. Brent Venables makes like $1.5 million or something, like $2 million or something, just to coach defense at Clemson. Why would that guy take half as much money to go to a G5 school to where he's got to run the complete show now? He's not going to do that. So you're going to have to find those up-and-comers that aren't necessarily household names that fans are going to be like, who's that guy? Well, of course he's who's that guy, because you don't know every coach on every staff. It's just you're not going to do that. And that brings me to the point about Coach Huff filling his own Marshall staff, his inaugural Marshall staff. It's going to be guys you've probably never heard of. So you're going to have to be forced to go back and do a little research. Where's this guy been? Who's he recruited? Which players has he developed? How many points per game did they put up at his previous stop? Or, what was the defense like at his previous stops? That's what you're going to have to rely on. I mean, let's just look at Western Kentucky for an example. They just went out and they hired the offensive coordinator from Houston Baptist. And a lot of guys were like, who? Why are we hiring a guy from Houston Baptist? What does Texas have to do with Bowling Green, Kentucky? And then you take 5 seconds and you Google search the offenses that he put together, and you see the yardage and you see the points, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, maybe I have never heard of this guy, but it looks like we're trying to put some points up on the board now. And that's what fans want to see. They don't want to see a 21-17 grind out game. They want to see a 50-7 blowout week in and week out. That's what they want to see. Do you want to pay $25 to sit in the end zone to watch a 10-3 ball game? No. You want to pay $25 to sit in the end zone to watch a 48-6 shellacking. That's what you want to see. You want to see people afraid to walk into Jones C. Edwards Stadium again. They used to be afraid, like, man, this is maybe not afraid is the word, but like it was an intimidating environment. It was hard to win at Jones C. Edwards Stadium. And let's face it, it's now not as hard to win. Rice came in and blanked Marshall at home. I mean, ouch. So some things are going to have to change, and filling the right staff up, finding the right athletes, putting more points on the board. That's what it's all about. Yeah. You used to win with defense. Now you don't win with defense. You win with offense and defense.
Great offense is better than great defense in 2021. That's just a fact.
It's a fact. You still have to be able to play defense. You know, and Marshall does that. Marshall's not going to go out and give up 50 points a game. You know, even in their worst years, they weren't doing that. I mean, worse than FBS years, they weren't doing that. So, you know, you got to feel confident in your ability to keep an opponent under 30. But that's the magic number. Steven has said it a million times. 30 points is the magic number in Conference USA. If you can get to 30, you maximize your ability to win. So if your defense can hold somebody under 30, you're going to win a lot of ball games. But that being said, Trace, give me some final thoughts, and we'll wrap up what we're talking about. Charles Huff here. Congratulations to him. We didn't even say congratulations to Coach Huff. Welcome to Conference USA's most intense rivalry. How about that? Final thoughts on Coach Huff and the hiring from Marshall.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was the hire that the Herd fan base needed. I mean, I feel like they needed something to unify everybody. This is the first time I feel like the fan base has been unified in 5 or 6 years, honestly. Like, I feel like it's been a long time since the fan base has been all on the same page with something. And that's a really good sign. And I think that, you know, like I said, they had to break out of that trend of hiring your buddies, hiring your West Virginians, hiring your Marshall alums. I think they needed to break that trend. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I love having West Virginia guys, you know, run the programs for Marshall. I mean, Dan D'Antoni has done, a great job with basketball, and he's had a lot of success with West Virginia players and, like, all that kind of stuff. And Doc had a lot of success at Marshall, and he's from my town. So, I mean, it just, you know, that's great to see. But, like, I feel like Marshall is at the point now where they needed to really break out of that. If they want to become like a national program again, I think you had to break out of that Southern roots type thing. I think you needed to really expand it, and they did that. I mean, they went and found a coach that's been picking the brain of Nick Saban for 2 years. I mean, that's pretty high profile coach for a Group of 5 program to get, and I feel like that it's, you know, it's just great because it's really gonna add a lot to the program. And like, I think that this is a hire that they needed to make. I think he's going to bring the most important thing that I think he's going to bring to this program right now is one thing that I think it's been lacking: swagger. I think he's going to bring swagger to the program. I mean, just if you just watch him, he just has the energy. Like, he's just, I don't know, like it's different. It's just different than Doc. He's a different personality. I think the most important thing that this program has needed is swagger, and I think he's going to bring that immediately. Now, whether it's going to translate to a conference title in year 1, I don't know, but I don't question that he won't bring swagger to this team, and he will bring in some top flight talent. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he's already on the recruiting trail right now hard. It's been not even 24 hours since he's officially been named a coach, and he's already offered a bunch of 4-star players. So, I mean, he's going to go after them. So whether he gets them all or not, it's a different story, but he's going to be able to recruit, and I don't question that in the slightest. I think this is a great hire. I'm excited to see what happens. I think the fan bases, I mean, everybody that's talking about him, like from the athletic department, says that you're going to love the guy. I mean, he's just, I can't wait to see, you know, like I said, that press conference, that introductory press conference deal. I can't wait to see that. I'm excited. So I want to see how this all plays out.
He was about to say, so let's go.
Let's go.
That's exactly what was getting ready to happen. But look, Steven was able to set aside a couple of minutes and joined us on the podcast here. So I'm going to be able to get Steven's reaction to the hiring here and what he thinks this means for the Herd from an opposing viewpoint. So, Steve, what about it? What about Charles Huff being named the next head coach at Marshall, Alabama associate head coach, running back coach, #1 recruiter in the nation? What do you think about the hire for Marshall?
I mean, I think it's an exciting kind of change of pace from where they've been for the last decade plus. I mean, to bring a young guy that's a top-notch recruiter, I mean, it really reminds me of kind of us bringing in Willie T, but Willie T didn't have the resume that this guy has. You know, this guy, when he's on the recruiting trail, he's showing a national championship ring to those recruits. maybe he can't promise a national championship at Marshall. Who knows? I mean, I doubt that ever happens, but that's still a pretty good selling point. Hey, look who I've developed. Look who I've been around. Look at my connections. Y'all talked about his recruiting. I mean, he offered a 4-star wide receiver within hours of being officially named. So, I mean, this guy is a worker. He's a recruiter. He undoubtedly has connections, just across the country with high school coaches. And maybe he's not getting the top tier 4- and 5-star guys. Maybe he's getting kind of those lower under the radar. Maybe it should be 4-star, those high rated 3-star guys. Marshall's always been a very good school to recruit to. And, I think this is going to raise that profile even higher. And when I jumped on, I heard y'all talking about maybe some of the concerns, and that's some of the concerns that I've also mentioned. And, having been a Hilltopper fan since 2002, I've seen, 5 or 6 coaching changes now. Several of those first-time coaches, the staff's being put together. That's my number one concern, just like it was for Sanford. I felt like that was kind of his undoing. He recruited very well, but his staff just wasn't strong enough to support his weak areas. And then his game day decisions. I mean, just being the guy now, he's the one that's managing the clock, managing the timeouts, managing the players, and the whole entire program. He's the one that has to make all those pieces work, whereas in the past, he just had to make his piece work. So I think anytime you get elevated to a position with that much more responsibility, there's going to be some hiccups. But I think having a good staff under him and behind him will help make those decisions easier, especially if it's people that have some experience and can help guide him and navigate him the right way. I think it's a great hire. I mean, I think Marshall, whether they see success right off the bat, I don't know. I don't know what type of system he's going to instill, if he's going to work around what he has with players, or if he's going to try to bring in a whole new crop of talent to fit what he wants to do. I don't think anyone knows that answer right exactly now, but I think as far as the change that was wanted and needed there, I think that's good, fresh, young energy and breathing some life into Huffington, West Virginia.
So let me ask you this, then. Do you think Marshall hired the best candidate that they possibly could have in this cycle?
Seeing, just kind of vaguely keeping up with who the options were and seeing the list, I mean, I would have steered the way that they did as well. I'm sure there's a lot of moving pieces and discussions behind that. But I think it's hard to go against someone that is from the Saban tree and that is the number one recruiter in the nation. I think that's a good recipe. And as long as he interviews well, he has a smart, a high football IQ, which I'm going to assume he does if he worked under Saban and was the associate head coach. I feel like this guy has been groomed and ready and should be good to go. I think he'll hit the ground running, as we've already seen recruiting-wise. He's already done that. So, look forward to, just big-name recruits starting to hit the splash and making big splashes there. And hopefully some wins. I mean, you have a lot of talent. You have Grant Wells coming back with some question marks, but he's still a good young quarterback. Plenty of talent there to win right away. But at the same time, if there's some stumbles and hiccups next year, some close losses, I think that's just growing pains. Been there, done that, seen it happen with Elson, with Taggart, with Brom even, as much as we hail and praise Brom, 2014, look at our first 5 games. There were some losses in there that weren't great before we went on a 6-game winning streak, whatever it was. There will be some hiccups in the road, but I think how he learns and adapts to those, kind of unlike what Sanford did. You talked about his insistence on going for it on 4th down on the wrong side of the 50. I mean, you have to learn and grow from those things. Do it once, shame on me, but, do it twice. You get fired, or you should. But I think it'll be fine. I think it's a great hire, and given the options that I saw and knew of, I think it's the right decision.
Yeah, based on the names that we saw floating around that were actually, on the trickle down list, I think Charles Huff was the best. If Brad Lambert wasn't the direction you were going to go, the in-house hire wasn't the direction, then this was by far the best of the outside choices, and honestly, for my money, was the best overall choice. What were you going to say, Trace?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing I wanted to add to that, and we haven't even mentioned it yet, but I think this is a huge hire for Marshall, and the fact that it's their first ever African American head coach in football. I think that's a big deal. I think that's a big deal. I think that's awesome. What's he going to be, like the 12th FBS black coach right now or something like that? I don't
know, but I will tell you this. I saw a tweet the other day that said 3 African-American coaches had lost their job in this hiring cycle, and he so far has been the only one that was hired. So I know that wasn't like that didn't play. I don't believe at all that played into you know why he got the job, but it's just cool that barrier was finally broken. And,
absolutely.
And I don't even think it was like an on purpose barrier. It's just the way it worked out. I mean, think about it. Marshall had 3 head coaches in the last 25 years. Yeah. Since FBS, they've had 3 coaches. Yeah. So that wasn't like it was on purpose, but it's pretty cool now that barrier is gone. It's just pretty cool.
It's historic.
Yeah, it is historic. So what I was going to say about Huff, I think this is a great hire in the sense that also he is, yes, a great recruiter. And I'm going to take you back 11 years, Trace. A lot of the things that folks said about Doc Holliday are ringing true right now. He's a great recruiter, but can he manage day-to-day operation? We'll see. I don't know. But what they said with Doc Holliday was all he's got to do is hire a great staff. Let them run the offense, let them run the defense, and he can fill the field up with athletes. And right now, I feel like that's the same kind of thing. But for all we know, Huff could be a great game day coach. I mean, there were rumors and swirlings around the fact that he was one of the favorites to potentially be named the Alabama offensive coordinator after Steve Sarkisian was hired by Texas until Bill O'Brien got the job after he was fired by the Texans. So, Huff could very well have been the Alabama offensive coordinator at this time right now instead of the Marshall head coach. And so if he becomes an Alabama offensive coordinator this year, if everything is a year later, right, like Doc's here for the 2021 season, and then they need a head coach, and then all of a sudden, okay, Huff's available again, but he's Alabama offensive coordinator, does that make the hire better in your mind? It's the same guy. Yeah. It just has a different title. So I think Marshall got the right guy at the right time, and we'll see how it all works out. The one thing I'm going to say aside from this is, this weekend we had Moonshine Throwdown hardcourt editions, men's and women's. The Toppers got the sweep over the Herd. On the men's side of things, it was split on the women's side of things. The Lady Herd handed the Lady Tops their first ever loss inside of the Cam Henderson Center, so that was pretty cool. The boys, the men's side of things, you can tell that Charles Bassey is just a massively different kind of player. I mean, man, if that dude doesn't have NBA lottery pick written all over him, then I don't know who does. Yeah. But no slight on the Herd. I mean, Tavion Kinsey's playing really good ball right now. Jansen Williams playing really good ball right now. A lot of the guys, the usual suspects, Andrew Taylor and Jared West are also doing well. And it's not the one-man show in Bowling Green either. Carson Williams is doing a really good job. Tavion Hollingsworth is in a little bit of a slump right now, but by end year, that guy is definitely not going to be playing the same type of ball. Hilltoppers and the Herd are both very, very dangerous teams, and I really hope they end up on opposite sides of the Conference USA Championship tournament bracket come season's end.
I wouldn't want to see either team in that tournament, I can tell you that.
Well, I want them to see each other in the finals again, because I think that, they probably are the two better teams. I mean, Western, I think right now is the best team in the conference. Marshall's just a tick below them right now, but it's still early, right? It's still early. We all know basketball is totally different at the end of the season versus the beginning of the season, and it's just the way it is. And if you're playing the right ball at the right time, you sneak up on some people and you can win a title. So, but the one note I wanted to bring, I don't mean to just gloss over that, but what I wanted to say about that was, I've talked about it on social media here, but I'm going to talk about it on the podcast because I think it's just absolutely amazing. We've been trying to seek donations and trying to fill these scholarship campaigns up. And if you still don't know what that's all about, it's not just us collecting money. I mean, we've started two rivaling GoFundMe accounts that are aimed at endowing an athletic scholarship, one at Marshall and one at Western Kentucky, right? So the beneficiaries of those GoFundMe accounts are the Western Kentucky Hilltopper Athletic Foundation and Marshall's Big Green Scholarship Foundation. So every donation is going to go directly to them once that minimum threshold is met. So it's $25,000 is the minimum threshold we need to raise for each school to endow a scholarship there, and that's what we want to do. And this weekend, Trace, I wish I knew who these gals were, if there's more than one person or if it's just one person doing this, but the Potty Train Tailgate is the account. They donated $1 for every point that was scored in both the men's games and the women's games, all 4 games. 1 point for every point scored in all 4 games to each scholarship campaign. So every point Western scored, men's and women's side, they donated $1 for each point to the Western scholarship campaign, and the same for the Herd. All in all, they donated a total of $554 just this weekend, Trace. 1 weekend. So this, so the Potty Train, I love that, has accounted for 2% of the overall goal just this weekend. How awesome is that? Folks, we really need you to get behind this. Like, I'm not asking for you to make a $100 donation or something like that. If we can just get enough people to donate $10, then we'll make this in no time. I mean, $10 here, $10 there. You know, like I said, I was trying to get folks to, donate a dime per point scored in one of the games. And we're talking, 70 points. That's $7. That's a $7 donation. And that's what we're needing from people. Small donations to make a big impact. So we will not quit until those goals are met. And it's hard. I mean, it's tough to raise money. It really is.
Yeah.
But I want people to know that this is completely safe and secure. It's 100% hands off by any of us. We don't come in contact with any of those donations. The only beneficiaries are the Big Green Scholarship Foundation and the Hilltopper Athletic Foundation. So they get it all. As soon as those goals are met, they get it all. It is untouchable by anybody until then. So please don't be shy. Make a donation, find a link, click a link, donate some cabbage, and let's endow a scholarship. If you're excited about Coach Huff getting hired, make a donation. $31. He's the 31st head coach. How about making a $31 donation? Hell, make a $3.10 donation. I don't care what it is. Every single dollar helps us get closer, and that's all we want to do is endow some scholarships. So, Trace, until the next time, let's get the heck out of here. You can take us out.
Let's go Herds.
Go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We'll see you next time. Later.